ready to get philosophical? No, come on, show me more excitement. Are we ready to get philosophical? Show me more excitement. Is that us talk? Yes. Well, you came for the wrong talk because unfortunately I'm not a philosophy expert, but I learned enough to be here today and present this to you. So, in my university days, I was reading a book called Sophie's Word. 12 years later, I saw this book in a library, and I remembered it. It opens with a teenage girl finding a letter in her mailbox. No sender, only two questions. Who are you? Where does the word come from? I have a question like that too. It popped in my head while I was staring at the perfectly working code, and I couldn't stop thinking about it since then. Why does bad code bother us when it works? Well, I'll tell you how Sophie's story ends later, but first let's stick to this question. Sophie didn't go looking for these questions. They found her, but she felt the pull to follow them and see where they led. And I felt the same pull. So, let's go where Sophie went first, shall we? Ancient Greece, 2,500 years ago, in Athens. And more precisely, to Plato, who looked at the world around him but couldn't stop but wonder, why does nothing ever match the perfect version in our heads? In other words, is there a perfect version of your code that exists, even if it never gets built? Sorry, my breath is like I can hear myself. It's annoying. I know. I'm sorry. I'll try to breathe from my mouth, but it's again, read with me. Is there a perfect version of your code that exists even if it never gets built? Try to think about it for a moment. Well, to answer that, take a look at this tray of gingerbread cookies. They all look the same at first glance. But take a closer look. You can see that some have dents, some have lost a corner. Yet if I ask you to describe a gingerbread cookie, you know exactly what to say, right? And why is that? Because somewhere in your head, you hold the mold. Not any cookie you've seen, but the perfect cookie that you can imagine it. Plato called these idea. It's the perfect form behind everything we know. Everything we see, it's an imperfect copy and is striving towards its mold. Now, if that's the case, you might ask me, okay, then Yara, what is the mold for my code? Well, I will tell you that you cannot see it, but you can feel it. That itch when you stare at working code and still feel annoyed, this is Plato's mold, and it's casting a shadow over everything you write. But Plato went a bit further. He believed that the soul, our soul, has seen all kinds of perfect forms and shapes before it inhabited the body. And every time we encounter something beautiful in real life, the soul remembers it, and it stares, it starts yearning. He called this yearning eros. Let's see how eros manifests in code. Take a look at these two methods. They're functionally the same. They're doing the same things. But one of them reads about like a sentence. Can you guess which one? Is it one on two? Raise hand. Wow, a lot of hands. Well, it's the version 2. And here it's because you can see the policy directly expressed. For every overdue loan, mark it as overdue, notify the member, and penalize. The first one is doing the same, but the policy is hidden under this conditional if, and it's waiting to be uncovered. And the second version is not a better piece of software objectively, it's doing the same thing. But you can clearly see the idea. You can see it's closer to the idea that you have in your head of what you want to do. We developers experience errors every day. Every time you refactor, every time you stare at working code and kill that itch, every time you start a new project and say to yourself, this time I'll get it right. Well, you probably won't. And it's not obsession. It's not, perfectionism. It's just your soul trying to return to the world of ideas. And the Ruby's community love for beautiful and aesthetics, that's not just perfectionism or art of code. It's Platonism. And this is why Max didn't want a language that just worked. He wanted a language that feels true. And if that's the case, then what is true language? Well, I would tell you it's an imperfect one. And this is why I have another question for you. When you make a pragmatic decision, are you being wise or are you just giving up? We spend hours and hours refactoring, and at some point, we stop. We say, this is good enough. But where this good enough is coming from? Well, Aristotle had different answers from his teacher. Quite the opposite, actually. He didn't believe that the soul belonged to some realm of ideas and it has seen all perfect forms. He believed that the perfect version of something is what it becomes when it fulfills its purpose well. To go back to our cookie analogy, according to Aristotle, all these cookies had the perfection in them. You can see the mold in each one of them. If a cookie made you happy, if a cookie tastes good, if it reminds you of Christmas spirit, it fulfilled its purpose well. Thus, it makes it perfect. And the only reason you can see the mold, it's because you've seen all these imperfect copies. So you can picture what the mold looks like. To understand this more, take the knife. A knife with a dent is not failing to be an ideal knife. A knife that is sharp and cuts well, that is the ideal knife. The perfect version of something is what it becomes when it fulfills its purpose, not how closely it resembles some imagined form. And to understand this a bit more deeply, Aristotle asked the deceptively simple question: why does it rain? Do we all know why does it rain? By show of hand, who knows why does it rain? Yeah, we all know, like, we study it in school, right? Let's see if what you're thinking matches Aristotle's answer. Aristotle believed it rains for 4 reasons. The first one, it's water, it's in the atmosphere, and it's waiting to fall. The second reason is the sun. The sun heats up the water evaporates, condenses, falls back to the ground. We have rain. And this was the effective cause. The third one is the water cycle. I think this is what you had in mind. This is what you studied in school. It's how the system works, how all the elements work together to finally have rain. To simplify things, we're gonna call them the physical causes. Now, there's one fourth cause that, according to Aristotle, was the most important one, which is to water the earth, to sustain life on the planet. And this is the final cause. We're gonna call it emotional cause, also to simplify things. So according to Aristotle, rain that never reaches the ground has failed its final cause. Now, after we understand this, let's see if we can apply it to our code. Why does my code look the way it does? Can you try to guess what are my causes here? Wow, time's up. The first cause is Ruby. It's Rails, it's your framework, your gems. It's whatever defines whatever is possible before you type a single line. The second one, it's you. It's me. It's anyone behind the screen is trying to type. The third one is the architecture, the patterns, the MVC, the services. It's how the whole environment, the whole water cycle of your code base. Now, if you haven't guessed yet the final reason, it's the problem it's trying to solve, that pain is trying to target, the user need is trying to target. So, a perfectly architected Rails application that doesn't solve a real problem has failed its final cause. But a messy controller that makes 10,000 users happy every day, according to Aristotle, this is a better piece of software. Now, he didn't literally say that, but I assume this is what he implied. Let's take an example. I have a library that shows, a dashboard for librarians to check their loans. And these loans can be from books, from magazines, from DVDs. Okay? And since they are all, different but still has some similar attributes, we created this loanable polymorphic relationship. And they have in common a title. So someone a while ago decided to cache the title. And this is how it looks like. I have a controller here, I'm fetching the loans, and then I'm rendering them with a cache. Perfect. Now a new engineer joins the team, and they see this. And first thing they have on their mind, why cache? Ruby on Rails has a perfect way of doing that. So they decide to include loanable here, And now it looks much neater, much nicer. You're directly calling loan.loanable.title. Perfect. They release it, they ship it, they move on. Few hours later, you start getting a warning on production saying that the page became slower. And it's obviously because now we're hitting the database to get the title and we're bypassing the cache. Now, this is a very simple example, but the whole point behind it is to say that probably the engineer who thought about using the cache, they were not being lazy or didn't know about the includes, but maybe they knew what the final reason, the final cause was. A page that loads 10,000 times a day is not the same that a page that loads once a week. So they decided to take this trade off. This is what we call in our word, right? Well, the Greeks had another name for it, phronesis. It's practical wisdom. It's knowing what the right action is, given real constraints and real consequences. This is why sometimes we decide to ship over refactoring. This is why sometimes maybe we ignore some warnings. Now, the engineer who decided to use the cache, they could have left a comment or documented something, and maybe this would have, avoided all this misunderstanding. But unfortunately, they didn't. And this is why I have a third question for you. Are you building things or are you thinking and code is just a residue? Every code base you touched, everything you worked on, you inherited from someone else. Someone iterated over it, and now it's your turn to do that. Well, Hegel had a definition called dialectic, which is that knowledge, like a code base, like coding, it moves through time, it's not static. The same way it moved from Plato to Aristotle, the same way it moved from Newton to Einstein, the same way it's moving now from one programmer to another programmer. Someone thinks something, the next person see where it breaks, where it doesn't work, tries to improve it, maybe rebuild things from scratch. But you can see, you can feel the knowledge moving. But this whole chain happens because you have thinking subject on both ends that make it happen. And this chain of thought can discover the generation before Hegel that it depends on something. Every interface you design, every comment you leave, you're not just passing knowledge because you cannot passively acquire knowledge. You construct the knowledge. Everything you do, you are shaping the conceptual world of the next person that will come after you. You are deciding how they're going to think about things. Let's take an example. I have two methods here. They're identical, they're doing the same. But one of them has more thought behind it. Can you try to see which one? If you guess the second one, you're also right. And here what happened is that the person writing this method, they paused for a moment and they thought, what should I name this? What should the next person think about it when they see it? So here you can see that the knower is still in these three lines, and they are shaping the conceptual world of the person who's gonna see them next. And when this thinking doesn't happen, the chain can easily break. But it doesn't break dramatically. It just goes quiet, like over time, without you noticing. This is why sometimes, I don't know about you, but sometimes I stare at my own code and I wouldn't even understand it. Because maybe not enough thought was put into it. And this is when thinking just becomes residue. Now, after just mentioning residue, I have one last question to ask you for today. What if the most important thing you do happens before you type a single line? Last exercise for today. Take a look at these two columns and try to see which one you identify more with. You could be part of the left, where you stay at your code. You might feel some bothering, so you start asking yourself some questions because there are some things that you care about. Let's call them stakes. And at the end, you enter a state of wandering. Or you could be on the left side, on the right side, where something works, the test passed, you're good, so you move on. So you never enter any state of wandering. You never ask yourselves any question. If you feel like you identify more with the left side, the Greeks had a name for it, Thomazen. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing this wrong, but I'm exotic. So Aristotle believed that philosophy starts when you stop asking how and you start asking why instead. Not how do I optimize this, but why does it bother me that it works? Why did I decide to take this approach and not another one? Why did I decide to ignore this warning? Why did I decide to postpone my refactoring? A lot of whys can be asked. Here's an example. I have a method here to calculate the late fee of a loan. Now, there's nothing wrong with it, so don't pick at it. It's just a mathematical operation. Here, the person can see the test pass, it works. They can move on and call it a day. Or someone else can pause for a bit and ask a few questions. Not because something is wrong, but out of curiosity, out of really trying to understand things. They could ask, okay, why per day? Who decided that? Why are we using 20%? Is this punishing the people who can least afford to return things on time? A lot of questions can be asked here. And here, these questions, they don't have to produce a code change, but they can produce a discussion, they can produce a review, a redefinition of some specs. This could be the questions that no one really cares to ask, but that are still important. Now, if you feel like you belong more with the right side, I feel you. And I want to say that it's not our fault. We tend to get really distracted with closing tickets, shipping things fast, moving fast. At some point, we just forget to ask why a ticket was even open. I would just get busy trying to close it fast and move on. And the thing is, we are not being bad engineers here if we do that. We are just engineers whose wonder, whose Tamazen has been crowded up and used up. Because here's what kills Tamazen. It's the velocity, it's the story points, it's the pressure to ship fast all the time. It's so hard to keep up with things nowadays. So, but there are good news. The good news is that Tamazen or wonder is like a practice, it's a culture. And it can be encouraged, it can be, cultivated. One way of doing that, one simple way, could be through code reviews. The next time you're reviewing the code, instead of just trying to correct things, finding the things that are wrong, that break, try to take another perspective. Try just to understand. Try instead, you can, for example, ask a question. Okay, I understand how this works, but help me understand, why did you take this approach? And here you don't need to have the right answer. You don't need to know the answer. You're just asking for the sake of asking. Because according to philosophy, understanding only can happen when you start asking questions. And preferably the right one. Every act of this presentation was about the same moment, the pause before the action. Plato called it eros, Aristotle called it phronesis. Kant and Hegel had their own agreement-disagreement. They talked about the chain of knowledge and the thinking subject that is very important. After I knew all this, I wanted to get a bit philosophical. So I decided that something is really common between all this. And it seemed like it's all about one question. It's why? In the end, I figured that the wondering was always the job, and the code was just a residue. Now, I promised you a spoiler. So, at the end of Sophie's word, Sophie makes a shocking discovery. Apparently, she was a character in the book. So, she was not just reading and learning about philosophy. She was being part of a book that someone wrote for someone else, and someone else was reading about philosophy. And me reading that book, me reading Sophie's word, I was also reading, learning about philosophy. So it was a whole inception moment. But I realized that we're all asking questions, we're all trying to answer them. So philosophy was happening to all of us. Take a look at that. You came here today for Tech Talks, but maybe in the last 20 minutes, some questions popped up that you weren't see coming. Maybe some questions that you couldn't easily answer, or some that made you feel uncomfortable. And I'm sorry about that if that happened. But I want to tell you that these kind of questions, you don't go looking for them. They arrive to you. And it's your call if you want to follow them or not, see where they lead. On Monday, you might open a pull request, or you might be reviewing a code or coding something. And something might bother you. You might feel an itch. Try to follow it. Try to ask why. Try to see where it leads. Because, like Sophie who found letters in her mailbox, this is where your story could start. Yeah, also AI. I didn't say AI.